everyone, welcome to the October Ask Tom Database Security Office Hours. My name is Richard Evans, and I'm a product manager of Oracle Database Security. This month's topic is on my favorite product, Oracle Database Vault, for which I am the product manager of. I took over from Alan Williams late last year, so it's been almost a year now. If you haven't joined us before, welcome. Thank you for joining this. This is our Ask Tom Database Security Office Hours. We hold this session once a month on the second Wednesday of every month at 10 a.m. U.S. Central. Everyone is welcome to attend this session, whether you use security products or you're just curious about database security products. Every session will include announcements, kind of what's going on with Oracle Database Security, where we're at with things. We'll include a technical topic, which is going to be Database Vault this month. And then we're going to have a Q&A period at the end. It's not limited to our technical topics, so if you have other questions, we can answer those. If you are not comfortable asking questions, you can always contact us offline if you wish, and we can have a conversation via email as well. So I'll put my email in the chat here. You can contact me at any time, and we'll try to get you to the right person if I don't know the answer. All right, some brief announcements here. Patching is coming up next week, next Tuesday. Tuesday or Wednesday should be released, that quarterly release update. Please stay on top of these patches. Please try to be current or current -1 or have a strategy there for how you're going to stay on top of patches. I always say hackers are inherently lazy, right? So rather than find their own vulnerabilities, they're going to look at the patches that were released by every software vendor and say, that's what Microsoft fixed. That's what Oracle fixed. That's what Cisco fixed. I can use that to my advantage. And that's when we start to see exploits come out and be more common, is after these patches are released. So stay current. If you haven't explored fleet patching and provisioning yet, please take a look at it. It allows you to create a gold image of your database home or your grid infrastructure home and to apply the patches across your fleet of Oracle databases. So for all security related patches, you can take a look at oracle.com/security-alerts. You can look at the Oracle support note 2118136.2. So today's topic is Oracle Database Vault. I put a QR code there to our links and notes on our GitHub page where I've documented these doc IDs as well as the link to the documentation. There's a primary note for Oracle Database Vault that you should bookmark in Oracle support. 1195205.1 is the Oracle support doc ID for that. And that should have all of the Database Vault related notes associated with it. If there's something missing, please go ahead and file feedback on it. Let us know that we're missing it, and that way we can add it to that list. Some things get overlooked occasionally. Another doc that I wanted to highlight that should be in that list as well is just simulation mode. Always look at simulation mode when you get to 12.2 or preferably 19C as an option for you to enable and then start to protect realms or create command rules and just get an understanding of what's going on before you enable Database Vault. We've got several presentations out there on simulation mode, so we're not going to talk about it today. But simulation mode is a fantastic tool to help you get started with Oracle Database Vault realms and command rules. Documentation. Always check out the documentation. Again, doc bugs, let me know. File a bug, file a report there on the page that lets us know if we've got a typo, if something is unclear. Help us improve the documentation. I meet with the doc writers twice a month where we go through and we make changes, we added things, we move things around, and there's been typos in there for years, and I've looked at these docs so many times that I didn't even notice that typo was there. So please be that second set of eyes for us and let us know. Okay. Oracle Database Security blog. There's a QR code here for our blog. Take a look at blogs.oracle.com/cloud security or take a screenshot of that QR code. We've got a blog out there on Oracle Cloud World. The new read-only auditor roles with Audit Vault and Database Firewall 20.8, 5 reasons to upgrade to AVDF 20. Autonomous database users can now be authenticated and managed with Azure Active Directory. Alan Williams is the product manager for that, and we did a presentation on it back in August. So you can go back to the Ask Tom website, watch that video on autonomous database and Azure Active Directory integration. as always, if you're doing transparent data encryption, you should be using Oracle Key Vault as well. So there's an announcement out there from a few months ago about some enhancements with Key Vault 20.4. Okay, LiveLabs. There's going to be a LiveLabs session on like attack and defend from ransomware. And you're going to be able to get your hands on it at Oracle Cloud World, but you can also just go run that at any time from Oracle LiveLabs. There's a QR code here, or it's available developer.oracle.com/livelabs. We've got 40 plus security related labs. Some are as short as 30 minutes, some are as long as 2 to 4 hours. We've got 25 plus labs that you can run on our platform, so it's no charge to you. So you can learn a new skill. You can get your hands on with encryption at rest, encryption in motion, protecting those keys with Key Vault, securing your data from privileged users or stolen credentials with Database Vault. You could assess the security of your database and users with DBSAT, DB Security Assessment Tool, or with DataSafe. You can discover, tag, and mask sensitive data with DataSafe, or with the sensitive data discovery and data masking and subsetting within Enterprise Manager. So there's lots of cool labs that we have out there. Again, if we're missing any labs, you're welcome to email me and let me know and say, hey, Rich, we're curious about this. Is there a lab for it? Is there something we could do? And so we're always working on spinning up some new labs and tweaking our existing labs too. So. All right, let's get to the technical topic of the day here. Again, I put these notes out on our GitHub repository. There's the QR code for it. I try to maintain a folder for every month. It includes how to contact me, support and documentation that I referenced in here, and then any sample code that we use or that we refer to. So I haven't put anything out there for Database Vault yet, but I'll put some stuff out there on the tracing and enablement, some of the things that you see in this presentation today. So you kind of know what the commands are and you could run it in your own environment. All right, our agenda today, we're going to do a quick overview of Oracle Database Vault, configuring Database Vault, user profiles and why they're important, enabling Database Vault. I want to talk to you about how to kind of think about, classify role importance, Database Vault roles once they're created and enabled and granted to the users. Some basic troubleshooting, and then maybe some next steps like what else you can go look at once we get there. But this presentation is really about getting started, that deployment strategies of Oracle Database Vault. We're not going to go into realms, we're not going to go into command rules. We're going to start with just the fundamentals of Oracle Database Vault. Okay. All right, so let's think about the database as a house, right? There are many ways that you can enter the house. Sneak in the back door, crawl through the window, maybe the chimney. I only know one guy who does the chimney thing. I am not him. But really, the only way we want folks coming into the database, to the house, is to knock and enter through the front door. This is the same thing with the database. We want sessions to be authenticated and authorized to the database. We don't want users going directly to the data through files, backups, or exports. We want to protect them from that. So think about the front door being those authenticated and authorized database sessions, the back door, the window, the chimney being those tools or techniques that curious, malicious users can use to bypass that authentication. So reading the database file off of disk or off of backup or off of export, right? So we want to push everyone through the front door. So encryption blocks that back door. Encryption protects that bypass type of attack from occurring. So now that they're authenticating, we let them into our house. How do we stop them from stealing our jewelry, right? We've allowed someone to come into our house. We've allowed someone to authenticate and be authorized in our database. Database Vault can help protect our valuables once someone is inside the house, okay? And to think about it like this is we've got all of these different users that are coming into our house, our database. So we've got our developers, our business intelligence users, our security administrators, our security officers, our DBAs, our container database administrators as well. And kind of that little devil sitting on their shoulder all the time is, hey, Dan resets passwords for friends, right? Someone stops by his desk, we call it a drive-by. Say, hey, Dan, man, I locked my password again. Can you unlock it to this system? Oh, yeah, don't worry about it, right? But that's not proper protocol. We don't want Dan just unlocking those passwords. We don't want Dave using sysdba for everything. We don't want security Steve, over granting privileges. We don't want Betty to browse employee salary data. She may be a BI user, but she does need to go after that salary data. We don't want Deborah logging in as that schema owner because it's easier for her, right? We want them to access only the roles, privileges, and data that they need to complete their job, okay? So Database Vault helps enforce this capability here where we can prevent these things in red from occurring with these users, okay? To get started with Oracle Database Vault, we have to begin with the end in mind, right? Why are you using Oracle Database Vault? What are you using it for? Like, what are your goals with Oracle Database Vault, right? Typically, prevent misuse or abuse of privileged user credentials, database administrator accounts, or application accounts, that developer logging in as the schema owner. We want to stop that, right? Limiting access to sensitive data to authorized points. Only the application should log into the database. Maybe restricting changes to your production window. I tell the story about how I made a change to a partition. That table had a global index. I forgot to include the clause that updated the global index, and I locked that entire transactional table for about 8 hours as we rebuilt that global index. That was not a fun day, right? So we can restrict these things so they don't occur. So accidents or malicious activity can be greatly reduced or prevented, right? Maybe we want to enforce that separation of duties. Steve should not be, accessing, overprivileging users. If he does, we can block it. And at the very least, we want to get highly valuable audit data out of it. So begin with the end in mind. Pick one of these things, like just start with one. Be focused and understand like what Database Vault can do, because it can quickly become overwhelming when you're changing the way you've used or managed an Oracle database for 35 years, and you're changing that by saying, hey, sysdba can't do all these things anymore. And so we don't want you to be frustrated by it. So, begin with the end in mind. All right, configuring an Oracle database is where we're going to start. Typically, there are 3 methods that we see users configure an Oracle database. The first and most common is Database Vault management by the container database. So on the left-hand side, that's creating those common DB owner, DB account users in the container database. Those common users then manage the Database Vault implementation on pluggable databases. Now, it doesn't mean that you have to have Database Vault enabled on all of your pluggable databases. You can still choose which pluggable databases DB is configured and enabled on, but that management of it will come from those C##, those C## DB owner, DB account manager users. And this is that default configuration if you run a DBCA installer using this option. And I've got a slide where we talk about that. The second option is to manage it by pluggable database. So this is where each pluggable database has its own Database Vault owner and Database Vault account manager that are separate from the container database administrator. So this allows you to manage Database Vault on a PDB by PDB basis with local users. And so you could have different teams, organizations, or customers managing Database Vault within their environment. So if you're using Autonomous Database, this is what we do in Autonomous Database. You are creating your own Autonomous Database. You are creating your own Database Vault owner, Database Vault account manager, and those are specific to your Autonomous Database. The third mechanism is to use operations control, which came out in Oracle 19c. With ops control, Database Vault is enabled, are configured and enabled at the container, but not at the pluggable. You don't have to configure it. You don't have to enable it at any of the pluggable databases. What ops control does is it separates those container administrators, including sys and system, from pluggable database administrators. And I'll show you a couple slides in more detail on these. Okay? All right, so if we're going to create common Database Vault users by creating with the database configuration assistant, the wizard there, we want like maybe a secure by default installation. So we do DBCA, we do a silent create database, and we look at the options for Database Vault. If you specify true, then you're going to specify the Database Vault owner username with it. So that's a mandatory parameter with the DB configuration set to true. An option that you can do is to separate that account management out from the database vault owner. Now, we recommend this for everyone, right? You want to use that DB owner user sparingly. Think of it as sys, think of it as root on a database or administrator on Windows. We only want to use those for when we have to do database vault management, realm creation, maybe enable or disable database vault, things like that. You want a separate user to be able to do those, create users, alter users, create profiles, alter profile capability there. So break out that account manager username and role there. So here's an example of what it would look like if you ran DBCA with a create database statement, creating a general purpose database with a SID of CDB1, created as a container database with one pluggable database named PDB1. And then we've got our DB configuration true. We specify our username of C## DB owner, our account manager of C## DB account manager, and we provide the passwords in there as well. When the database is created and it's ready to go, in the $V container and DB status view, I join these together so you could see the container name instead of the container number. But you'll see that in the root, database vault is both configured and enabled. In the pluggable database, you're going to see that database vault is configured but not enabled yet. So what that allows you to do is then maybe install your application, do everything you need to do to get that application functional in that pluggable database, execute the enable command, restart the pluggable database, and then your pluggable database will be ready to go. Okay. So kind of what that looks like here is you set that force local DB option default when you run configure DB. Now it's there by default. So a lot of times you just overlook this parameter because if you're not setting it to true, you don't even need to run that parameter. But you do that, you enable it as database vault owner, and then always make sure that you're granting the DB owner, DB account manager to backup users as well. So you have multiple users that have these roles. And remember, with admin option, you need that with admin option too. And we'll talk a little bit about user management a little bit later here. But you want to make sure that you're granting that DB owner role specifically to an additional user and that you maintain those passwords. Okay. You restart the database as sysdba or sysopper. We've got a whole section on enabling database vault, and you're off and running. So when you get to the pluggable database, any one of them, then all you have to do is configure it, enable it, and restart that database. You don't have to run the grant statements because those grants are coming from the container and being shared with each of the pluggable database. So here you can see that we've got the same users for DB owner and DB account manager on both the container and the pluggable database. Okay. Now our configuration strategy for local users, we set that force local DB to true. So we're going to say that database vault owners must be local accounts. We set that to true. And then what we've done is we go through that same process on the CDB side, but on the pluggable database side, you see I have different owner and account manager users here. I've got an HR, I could have a finance, I could have whatever you want to name them. I've got those different local accounts that I'm using to configure database vault and to grant roles to them. Again, though, remember, if I'm doing it at the local level, I have to make sure that I have that backup account, that I've got that database vault owner role granted to other local users with admin option. So think about that database vault owner role, kind of like a TDE wallet or TDE wallet password. We never want to lose that password because this is kind of our break glass. This allows us to disable realms, allows us to disable database vault. So you always want to have kind of a break glass, an escape hatch, some kind of a mechanism in order to protect yourself. And I've got 3 strategies to help you with that coming up. Okay. Now that third option, that's an Oracle 19C feature with operations control. Same thing on the left-hand side, We configure database vault, we enable it, we grant the roles with admin option, we restart the database. But the thing that we add is that enable app protection. And what that allows us to do is then have database vault enabled and configured on the container database, but on that pluggable database, it's not configured, it's not enabled, but DV app protection shows enabled. And what that does is that basically separates those container administrators from that local, from those local objects within each of the pluggable databases. So to expand on that, what that looks like is we've got, let's say, George is our container DBA. George has access to everything. He's a DBA. He logs in. He manages the container database. He creates pluggables. He starts them, he stops them, he drops them, he backs them up, he upgrades, he patches. George does everything on the container database that a typical infrastructure type database administrator would do. With ops control enabled, George can't go into those pluggable databases and query the HR data. He can't query the finance data. He can't query data that's related to those local users. So he knows the object exists because he can look at DBA objects, he can do a describe, but he can't create or modify those local user objects. That would be CAT. CAT is the DBA for HR, let's say. So we've isolated that HR data to CAT, our DBA. We've isolated retail or healthcare data to Cliff. We've isolated our top secret data to Joe, maybe our company formula, our secrets. And then Joe helps out a little bit with maybe some of that retail or healthcare data there too. So with ops control, we're allowing local administrators essentially free reign in their PDB. They don't know that database vault is enabled at the container database. They don't know that George is there and that he's been blocked from accessing that data. They don't have to have any DV database vault related roles like account manager or Golden Gate or any of these type of things in order to perform their day-to-day operations. But we've locked George out of those pluggable databases. So I would really encourage you to explore operations controls because I think it blends the best of both worlds. I think it gives you the security that you need from database vault, but it gives you the flexibility you need within each of the pluggable databases to allow those local, maybe application DBAs to perform their tasks and not be affected by database vault roles and restrictions there. So take a look at operations control as a part of Oracle 19C as a configuration strategy. Okay, after we've configured the Oracle database, I want to talk about profiles for some of these users so we can prevent account lockout. Oracle we recommend that you create these database users with profiles that don't lock, okay? Treat them as service accounts. Treat them as application accounts, whatever you call them within your organization where you have accounts that don't lock. These accounts should follow that policy. It's not always possible, I understand, but if you can, please try because if we lose this password, if this account gets locked, then we're not going to be able to disable database vault. We're not going to be able to create realms. It's kind of like losing your wallet, right? Like we at Oracle or Oracle support can't help you get back in here, right? But we can mitigate that risk a lot, right? So one of the examples that we use is create a profile, whether a common profile or a local profile that says, hey, after 5 failed login attempts, I'm going to lock this account for 1 minute. And that's it. I'm going to lock it for 1 minute. And then if you have the right password, you can authenticate. This typically will trigger, an alert, something within your environment, or you'll actually see that, oh, the account is locked. I'm not getting in, or this process has failed. And so we're not really sure what's going on there. And so you can at least see that the account was locked. You get that error message. Then after 1 minute, it'll be unlocked automatically, okay? One of the things that we've done in order to help protect database vault owner from being locked out or DV admin is to make it so connect command rules do not apply to users with the DV owner or DV admin role, okay? So we've had users in the past, customers in the past who've created a connect rule and the logic on their rule set was off, and they've locked themselves out of that Oracle database system. So when they try to connect to /assist-DBA or system or DB owner, they were locked out of that database. In response to that, that connect command rule does not apply to users with DB owner or DB admin. Okay, so between the profile and between this connect, we're trying to make sure that we mitigate the risk to this root-like account that you have within Oracle Database Vault. User management, all right, preventing password loss. So typically there are 3 mechanisms that you can use to protect these critical accounts. The first and most common is to duplicate your database accounts. You should always have at least 2 users with Database Vault Owner and Database Vault Account Manager. Personally, I don't mind if you have a couple accounts that have both of those roles, but please make sure you're protecting those passwords. Vault them, put them in a privileged account manager somewhere, write down that password, put it in an envelope, stick it in a safe, put it somewhere that you have access to it. But make sure that you have duplicate accounts for Database Vault Owner and Database Vault Account Manager. And also make sure that you're granting that with admin option to those users as well, because you need to be able to revoke these highly privileged roles from users when you change their password. And I'll cover that a little bit more when we talk about, you know, roles and how I think about roles and everything. Okay. Identified externally. I've got my Oracle Linux Penguin there wearing his unbreakable armor or whatever he's got on there. So what you can do is you can map database users to operating system users. These users can be identified externally, and then you can grant these externally identified database users that DB owner role or DB account manager role, and that authentication is managed and handled by the operating system. Okay, so that reduces the risk of lockout. We do this for Key Vault. We do this for Oracle Database Audit Vault, for Oracle Audit Vault as well. So in order to change these passwords, you would log in as the specific operating system user, do a /, you'd be authenticated externally, and then you would have the DB owner, DB account manager role, or whatever roles were granted, and then you'd be able to perform those actions. So that's a really, really good mechanism to always have that break glass account for your DB owner role. Make him externally identified, lock that operating system account, or check that password in, maybe set it to no login instead of giving it the bash shell. And then you could have root go and modify that. So it would still require, like, you know, 2-person integrity, 2 separate users to go in his root, you know, set the user so he could authenticate and use a bash shell. And then you'd log in as the DB owner OS user, and then /, and then you'd be able to disable Database Vault or disable the realms or do what you need to. This is all in case you lose that primary account password, right? The other mechanism, which is, I would call maybe like a new school way of doing things, is identified globally. You can utilize centrally managed users and Active Directory, or you can utilize enterprise user security, OUD, OID, and you can allow those directory-based users to be mapped to shared users or dedicated users within the Oracle database. You map the groups within Active Directory or your LDAP directory service to local roles within the Oracle database, and you grant DB owner to those roles, to that role. You grant DB account manager to that role, okay? Then when the user authenticates to the database, they authenticate using their Active Directory or their LDAP account, username and password, and that we see that mapping occurs and that they're in the group in Active Directory or your LDAP service, and they have the role that has been granted DB owner. So they use their Active Directory login and they can access the database and they can be granted the roles. So you can't make Database Vault related roles globally identified. Those are always local roles, but you can create, in this scenario, a global role and then grant the Database Vault role to that global role, okay? And, you know, we'll do another presentation on this in the future, but these are the 3 the three mechanisms that you can and should use in order to protect your database, your critical database vault accounts. Okay, always duplicate the accounts, maybe have a user identified externally, or if you're already doing CMU or you're doing directory integration, create the groups within your directory, map them to roles in the database, grant the DB owner that role. And that way, again, we've got that two-person integrity where the Active Directory or the directory administrator goes in there and adds your directory user to that group. Then when you authenticate to the database, you then have access to DB owner, okay? We've set the stage here. We've talked about like kind of where we're at with start with the end in mind. We've configured database vault. We've created profiles. We've backed up those accounts. We've created duplicate accounts there. So we have a redundant break last kind of scenario. We haven't enabled it yet though, right? We want to enable it. Typically, there are three strategies here for enabling database vault. The first and most easiest, single instance, configure and enable it, restart it, right? Database vault must be restarted in order for it to be enabled or disabled, okay? Again, that's that two-person integrity thing that database vault enforces. We've got a user such as sysdba or sysoper that must, basically turn the key, reboot the database. We've got a user database vault owner that must turn the key, enable it or disable it. So where they both do that, and then database vault is either enabled or disabled. Now, in some situations, hey man, we don't want that downtime. We want to perform this as a rolling enablement like we do our patches. We can do that with Oracle RAC, and we've got a couple slides on that. Same thing with DataGuard. Now, DataGuard isn't a high availability solution per se, it's a disaster recovery solution, but you can enable database vault on that standby database before it's enabled on the primary, and then have it enabled on the primary or the old primary during a switchover operation, okay? So the first one, single instance. We've selected one of our configuration choices, whether we manage by container, by pluggable, or we're using ops control. We log in as that database vault owner role. We log in with a user with database vault owner. We execute dbms macadam.enable dv. And then we've got our sysdba or our sysoper who restarts the database, right? Really straightforward there, right? So we are going to have that downtime there associated with a single instance. Now, if we're using RAC, we can do a rolling enablement of database vault. Okay, so you perform the same configuration and enablement you would on a single instance, and then you follow the maximum availability architecture planned maintenance steps. Okay, I took these steps out of the documentation. I am not a RAC expert, but if you use RAC and you do RAC rolling patches when those come out quarterly, then you understand this process here. But basically, the idea is that we can take a node out of the service pool. We want to get all of those sessions onto the other services so we can drain those through mechanisms we have available to us. And then we can just cycle through each of these. So the database vault just has to be configured and enabled on the first node. And then the additional nodes just simply need that restart operation to take place in order for database vault to be fully enabled across our 3-node RAC cluster in this example. DataGuard. Again, DataGuard is a disaster recovery solution, not a pure HA high availability solution like RAC is, okay? But you can do something similar with RAC. So you'd perform that same configuration enablement you would on a single instance, and then database vault could actually be enabled on that physical or logical standby before it's enabled on the primary. Typically because you have the ability to restart that standby database before you restart the primary database. So I used to work for an organization that did quarterly switchovers. We would run the databases in one data center for the first quarter of the year. We'd switch over to another data center for the second quarter of the year. Maybe there'd be some planned maintenance operations that would be going on with the generators or with the power or something within the data centers. So we could switch back and forth. And we always made sure that we had that capability to run in data center A or data center B. Now, there was a data center we preferred because it did have more equipment, it had more application servers. So maybe during Black Friday, during high traffic times of the year, we would prefer to run in one data center, but we had that option to switch back and forth. So if you run your database environment in a similar fashion where you've got some opportunity to switch from one database to another, you can piggyback on that switchover when you enable Oracle Database Vault. So think about your enablement of Database Vault as, a patching operation or included in maintenance, different situations like that, upgrades. Maybe you're using Golden Gate and you want to Golden Gate switch over to another environment. There's lots of different ways that you can enable Database Vault here and minimize your downtime, just like you do with patching. All right, Database Vault is live, right? Your database has changed. When you log into the database, you're going to see a bunch of these roles, and they're going to kind of look like they're scattershot like this too. Like, okay, I don't really understand why this does this or why this does that. Please look at that documentation, understand what a lot of these roles mean. I created this little kind of quadrant chart here where that upper right-hand corner is the most important role. On that far right-hand side, x-axis, is the ability to affect data, access data, or affect Database Vault itself. Okay, that y-axis is the risk to your system if the user is lost or stolen. And these are not users, these are roles, but users who are granted these roles, right? And so we always want to make sure that we're protecting this quadrant of accounts up here, with Database Vault owner being the most important role, right? He is the TDE wallet. He's that TDE wallet password. He is the master key. This role is that end all be all of Oracle Database Vault. So it can enable or disable that account. And then you can pretty much always get into sys, right? You can always slash the sysdba, log in and restart the database, okay? But make sure you're protecting these accounts. Database Vault admin is kind of like the lieutenant to Database Vault owner. He can do, Database Vault owner or admin role can do most everything DV owner can do except enable or disable. Database Vault account management role, important because it can lock and unlock accounts, create accounts, connect, reset passwords. It can do all of those things. And DV patch admin is important because when you patch your database, you grant this role to sys, and sys can do a bunch of different things in order to apply patches or upgrade your database. So at the very end of that patch process, you want to revoke DV patch admin from sys, okay? Now in the bottom right quadrant here, right, less worrisome if the user with this role is lost or stolen, but still high accessibility to data, right? In order to data pump across the network link, we need access. In order to use X streams, we need access. In order to perform Golden Gate, right, we need access to redo log data. We need to be able to access some of these critical components of the Oracle database. So these roles are highly important too. Audit cleanup, right? Just like it sounds, deleting audit data. Security analyst, similar, being able to query that audit data, get understanding of what's going on in the database from a security point of view. DV monitor, you see this role granted to DBS and MP because DBS and MP needs to look at the health of the Oracle database. But right, those views can contain sensitive data. They can contain data about queries, about find variables, about what objects exist in the database and stuff. So again, some risk to your system if users are lost or stolen that contain these roles, but not nearly as bad as your DV owner, DV admin, account manager, patch admin and stuff. And then, I'm going to skip over the realm owners and everything and just DV public. This is a role that's granted in order to allow users to be able to execute some of the command rules, the factors, some of the procedures and packages that are associated with Database Vault, okay? Now, let's go back real quick to this top quadrant here, okay? If you're going to reset the password for a user who has DV owner or DV account manager, look at the documentation, because in order to do that, you're gonna have to revoke DV owner from that user first, which is why I've been just harping on the fact that you need to give your duplicate accounts that with admin option in order to make sure that they can grant and revoke that role from the other accounts, right? We don't let a user with account manager capabilities just go and unlock or reset the password for database vault owner, right? That would violate that two-person integrity. That would violate the separation of duty. We'd then have account manager be the most privileged role and most, important role in a database. And it's like, whoa, no. Database vault owner is that role. It can enable and disable. It can create realms. It can create command rules. It can do all that stuff, but it can't do account management if you've separated that capability. So think about it is, you have to take away that privilege before you can perform maintenance on these accounts, right? We need to block off that room before we can remodel it, okay? If you're unsure if database vault is involved, it probably is, right? Enable tracing to take a look at it, okay? We're going to walk through kind of a tracing example here. First thing you have to do is grant DV admin to sys, okay? Again, trace files and altering the system can contain sensitive data, can give access to sensitive data, like database vault creates that separation of duty. And so in order to enable tracing there, the easiest way is to grant DV admin to sys, and then as sys on that pluggable database, set alter system, set events, trace DV to highest. I set it to highest. It's the easiest. I just want to see everything that's there and look through those trace logs, okay? So now let's test it. As sys, we execute the select account from HR employees. We get insufficient privileges, right? Remember, if sys gets insufficient privileges, if he gets a 1031, it's database vault related, right? Sys can do anything. He's root, right? So even root on Linux has some restrictions if you got SE Linux enabled, right? There's some controls and protections there. So if you're seeing that control, that 1031 error, and you have enough privileges, then it's going to be database vault involved. So then what we do is we go to the operating system, we look in our trace directory, we find the trace file, and we can see here the result was a realm authorization failed. We can see the realm name. We can see the current user, which was sys. We can see the objects and the owner and the types, and we can see that SQL statement that it failed. So this comes in really handy when you're banging your head against a situation, maybe a Golden Gate scenario where you're like, oh man, he should have enough privileges, right? We tend to over-privilege Golden Gate. Hey, go ahead and enable tracing and take a look at those trace files to try to understand what's going on and where database vault might be blocking it, and then what realm or command rule it's associated with, okay? Now remember, disable trace and revoke that DV admin from sys, okay? We want to revoke that privilege because otherwise sys would be able to modify realms or command rules. And if that's not what we want sys doing, then we want to make sure we revoke that role. Some examples here. Successful rule set evaluation might look like this. We alter system. We can see what rule ID and rule set name is involved in here. The allow fine-grained controls for audit system. We can see that sys ran it, and we can see the command that sys ran. So that's when I enable it. It audited that as well, and we can see that in the trace file. Here's a failure of a rule set evaluation where, let's see, the command that was blocked was connect. The rule set name was trusted application path. So we're trying to control how the HR user connects to the database. So here we can see that there was an evaluation and that failed. So I'd want to go look at that trusted app path rule set and look at those rules and try to figure out, okay, why did the evaluation here fail? If I expected it to succeed, do I have my logic backwards in my rule? Like, did I not include the users? Did I not include, is my and or, is my or and and, whatever I need to do there to make that rule set evaluate the way I expect it to. Here's one where the realm authorization passed. The current user is the object owner or has object privileges. Cool. DBSNP can select their object of baseline statistics and the object type is table. And then here, object privilege passed. DBSNP can run this query against these objects. So it's really handy to get an idea of where that breakdown is within, maybe the evaluation process, okay? So tracing, enabling tracing is a quick and easy way to just figure out and help pinpoint like where you're at kind of in that stack process, okay? All right, next steps, we're going to cover these in a future presentation here, but remember, the only way we want people visiting the Oracle database is through the front door. We want them to knock and be authorized, right? Database Vault is that mandatory access control that can help protect your database once you've authenticated and authorized users within the database, okay? So next steps, I've got some QR codes for here for you to snap a picture of. These links are also available on that GitHub repository page that I've created for this month's session. This is the next steps. We've covered use cases as far as like command rules, realms, secure application roles, trusted application path. We've covered a lot of these in other database security office hours topics. So go back, take a look at those videos, let me know if there's something that we're missing or something that you're unclear about. And then if you want to get your hands on Database Vault, go check out LiveLabs. We've got a LiveLabs out there specifically on Database Vault. That's a virtual machine and it's on premises. We've got another one out there, that last one, prevent unauthorized data access to autonomous database with Database Vault. It's a live lab where it spins up an autonomous database and you go through that process of configuring and enabling Database Vault within your ADB instance, okay? So hopefully this presentation has given you something to think about when it comes to getting started with Database Vault. I think we've jumped ahead. I've jumped ahead in a lot of these presentations where, hey, I just love getting my hands on it and playing with the rules and, what can we do with it? But we need to take a step back and look at how do we want to configure it? How do we want to enable it? How do we want to manage users? How do we protect those users from lockout? How do we make sure that we have duplicate accounts there? And, that's all things that we've covered today. We've gone over, the configuration strategy, the profiles, enablement strategies, roles and responsibilities. And then, when in doubt, trace it, right? Take a look at trace and see what it shows you, bang your head for a little bit. But after that, hey, just go straight to trace and take a look at it, okay? All right, everybody, thanks for joining us today. Next Database Security Office Hours will be Wednesday, November 9th. So coming up early in the month.